Yeah, we all got that one. Oh no, only 2 people answered.
Sorry, it has disconnected from my phone.
Oh,
And then
okay.
I tried to get back in, but now it's wanting me to do a nickname, and so I don't I don't know if I'm able to get back on.
We can try. You can try it, and then if it doesn't
Okay.
let you, then you can just like type in the chat your answer.
Okay. Sorry.
No worries.
Um,
I'm just gonna keep going if that's all right, Hillary.
yeah.
Okay, so like the poll said, it's very important to incorporate Indigenous storytelling, whether you do or don't have Indigenous students in your classroom. And this quote from the Ways of Knowing Guide, Earth's Teachings, this is from one of the readings that Doe gave us a while back with Picture the Moon assignment. And this quote reads, cultural stories not only direct personality, social order, actions, and ethics, they also set out the proper context for a person's life. Cultural stories and traditional teachings give life structures and meaning. They are the oral reference libraries that account for stories, legends, prophecies, ceremonies, songs, dances, language, and the philosophy of people. It's important to stay within, like when you're teaching Indigenous history, it's important to stay between what they say is like the shared history. So instead of teaching about things that only elders would normally pass on, discuss and teach things like treaty education, talk about water, Mother Earth, the solar system. And like I said, avoid teaching about cultural practices and tokenism, because as if you aren't from the Indigenous descent or Indigenous background, then you can't teach something that what elders would be teaching. And if you do, then you have to make sure that you're acknowledging the origins and the authors of the story. Okay. So when you're using Indigenous stories in your classroom, there's certain things you just need to keep in mind as you read it. So for this, you want to make sure that you're setting expectations for your students so that your students really know why they're learning what they're learning. So you can do this by letting them know to take time to think about the story and to reflect on the meanings. And make the students familiar with the format of the stories. A lot of the stories, like the one that we're going to read in a couple of slides, uses the same characters, or they're like called trickster stories, and just make sure the students are familiar with that. And I can't repeat this enough, is just make sure that the history is of the story and the author is presentable to the students. And some learning goals of storytelling is memory skills, because Indigenous storytelling, a lot of the time it's just an oral practice. So a learning goal is memorization for the students, that they're also learning reading, oral communication skills, they're practicing their listening skills. And a big part, again, like I said, because it's all orally told, they're practicing using their imagination. But then there's also some important things to do as a teacher when you're telling First Nations storytelling. So a big part is using repetition. Repetition is an important element that Indigenous or First Nations storytellers use, because it is oral, and that's how traditions are passed down from generation to generation. The stories need to be told and felt over and over again so that they can really make a difference and an impact. Also, to make sure that these stories become a ritual and a part of the classroom, that they're accessible to all the students. So as a teacher, you want to have baskets of Indigenous stories if it is in the written form. And as a teacher, you want to rehearse telling the story to the students so that you can identify critical elements to make the story come alive for your students, and allows the students to pay attention, because if you make this oral story fun and engaging, students will pay more attention. So I just have another poll here for us. Have you ever used Indigenous stories on your placement or in the classroom? So I have some yeses and nos. For those yeses, do you remember the titles of the story or when you used the stories? You can just.
I don't remember the actual name, so I don't want to butcher it.
Mhm.
But we were it was my last placement, and we were learning about water, and it was nibes, like something with that in the title. I don't want to butcher it, but it basically got water protectors.
Oh,
Uh,
okay,
and I remember we read a lot of Indigenous stories about water.
that's
Um,
awesome.
I just don't remember
Yeah,
the exact titles.
I don't remember the title or the author. This was a couple of years ago. I think in a primary class, it was just like basically introducing residential schools, like a story from a child's perspective that was like primary friendly.
Mhm.
That one was interesting as well.
I used there was a lot of like those trickster stories in my guided reading for my grade threes, which was I thought was really cool to have Indigenous stories, and a lot of them was like how the bear lost the tail, or and how the bird got its voice and things like that, which I thought was cool to integrate that into guided reading. Uh, so, um, the story that we're going to read is called The Butterflies Story. And um, uh, they're like I've said, how Indigenous stories are passed on orally. I made the decision to I'm going to put the story up on the screen just because I find with online learning, it's really hard to engage and just listen without a visual. So in the classroom, I would do it about 50-50, sometimes with photos and sometimes just orally. And it is important to acknowledge the history. So I have that here. So we respectfully acknowledge the Anishinaabe from Wik-Wemikong for sharing the legend of Nanabush. The Anishinaabe story is translated into English by Sally, and the animation of the Nanabush story is designed by Anishinaabe playwright Alanis King. So this is the character Nanabush, or also known as Nanabozo. This character is half man, half spirit. He has all the powers of the great spirit and holds all the weaknesses of mankind. He's a magical being and he can transform. He's often hungry and he's considered a trickster character. There are many legends and stories about this character that you can teach in your class. The Nanabush came up in a couple of the guided reading stories as well. So this is a character that you can bring in frequently to your classroom, as he is a trickster character, and usually the stories that he's in, they have like a meaning and a moral behind it. So it's great to teach lessons to your students. So I'm going to quickly read the butterflies story, and then after that, there's going to be a question on the order of what happened in the story, just to practice our listening skills, I guess. So here we go. A long, long time ago, a pack of wolves happened upon a group of very young children. They were toddlers. Maybe they were 1 to 2.5 years old. The wolves didn't notice any adults anywhere. They realized the children were all alone. The wolves decided that they would protect and raise the children as their own. So every day they would take them to the edge of the water, and the children would follow them, crawling with all 4 limbs, just like wolves walk, and lap up water just as the wolves do with their tongues. And every night, the wolves would put the infants, the toddlers, into a circle of soft grass and have them go to sleep. As soon as they were asleep, the wolves would encircle them and lie down to protect them through the night, and all would go to sleep. One wolf often stayed up and howled with the moon. And this is how they lived every day. Soon, Nanabush came upon them and noticed how the children were beginning to act like wolves. They gathered and ate food like wolves. They stayed on all 4s and never stood up. They communicated with each other like wolves. Nanabush realized it was time for the children to join the human race. Nanabush thought and thought of how he was going to do this. Finally, Nanabush went to the water's edge, and there he grabbed a handful of pebbles. He went to where the children were playing and said, "Look!" When they got their attention, Nanabush threw the pebbles up into the air, and magically the tiny pebbles turned into butterflies that were in every color of the rainbow. The children were very excited and stood up on their own 2 feet and ran to chase and try to catch the butterfly. from then on, the children joined the human race. So that is the oral story of the butterflies. In the classroom, you'd read this a couple of times, but for time's sake and because of the internet, we're just going to read it once. So on the next slide, there's an option. I'm going to give you 4 different parts of the story, and you can drag and drop them into the correct order. And this is something you can do with your students, but just orally, like have the students summarize what happened in the story.
I'm not gonna lie, this is a little hard.
Sorry. For someone who has already answered, am I recording?
Yeah.
Okay, I just want to make sure I don't have any more mistakes. I'm so sorry about the time. So the correct order is a pack of wolves found a group of young toddlers they cared for, and then Nana Bush found the children acting like wolves and then planned for them to go back with the pebbles, and then when he threw the pebbles, they turned into butterflies and they stood back up. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about 3 activities that you can use with this short story in your classroom, but the 3 activities can also, they can be used with any short story, any Indigenous story. So yeah, we're going to start off with a drama activity. It's all arts related, so any art activity. So there's a drama, music, and art, like visual art. So for the drama activity, I adapted it from the National Center for Collaboration of Indigenous Education. And that was that website that we used the other day in Doe's class that has awesome resources for lessons. But before that, I had actually found a very similar activity in the Toronto Zoo's Ways of Knowing partnership Turtle Island Conservation Program, and that was in the curriculum-based activity guide, which is also another resource Doe gave us. And that's why in my little short snippet or summary, it had like the turtle and the bear, because I was going to do that story, but this one was a bit shorter and worked out better for this activity, but it kind of shows how you can really do these with any short story. So for drama, we'll be acting out the short story with the students. So we're quickly going to brainstorm some of the different characters that we could use from the story that we could act out.